The river ran black under the waning moon, its surface broken only by the faintest ripple. Officer Ethan Cole's boots pressed into the mud, heart hammering, as his K9 Brutus sniffed furiously at the banks. The blood trail was fresh, too fresh, and it led straight into the dark water. A chill gnawed at Ethan's spine, a warning he couldn't ignore. Something wasn't right. He had followed trails before, solved murders, faced criminals, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the city's calm veneer was about to shatter, and whatever surfaced from that river would leave an entire town gasping in disbelief. If you appreciate stories that grip like this, give a like and subscribe. There's more unfolding with every chapter. The wind tugged at the thin trees along the riverbank, bending their skeletal limbs like desperate hands reaching for something unseen. Officer Ethan Cole crouched low, his flashlight sweeping across the mud-slick ground. Brutus, a massive German shepherd with ears sharply pricked, growled low in the back of his throat, nose pressed to the earth. The trail was there, stark and unmistakable, a crimson smear that glistened under the pale moonlight. Ethan's mind raced. He'd seen death, plenty of it, but the way blood glimmered like a silent scream in the dark always unsettled him. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, though the chill cut sharper than summer heat ever could. "Brutus, steady," he whispered, though his voice barely carried over the rustling branches. The dog hesitated, then barked sharply and pulled forward, breaking Ethan from his reverie. The trail curved closer to the river's edge, the mud yielding to shallow water. Ethan's stomach twisted. Whatever this was, it hadn't just been bleeding, it had been dragged. The town of Millersbrook lay a half-hour drive upstream, small and sleepy, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's birthdays but also kept secrets tucked away behind white picket fences. But Millersbrook had a river that didn't forgive, a dark vein cutting through the forest, swallowing everything that strayed too close. Ethan had grown up near the river, fishing with his father on weekends, never imagining it could become a path for horror. A splash echoed from the current. Brutus barked again, frantic this time, claws scraping mud. Ethan's flashlight caught something, a flash of pale, unnatural color floating in the water. He stepped closer, the soft earth giving way beneath his boots, heart hammering. "Ethan," a voice came from the shadows behind him. Sergeant Marla Jensen emerged from the trees, flashlight in hand. Her expression was tight, almost grim, a tension Ethan recognized immediately. Marla had been on the force longer than he had, sharp-eyed and ruthless in her judgment, but she also carried guilt like a second skin. "What is it?" she asked, crouching beside him. "Blood. Fresh. And it leads straight into the river." Marla's eyes narrowed. "We're not just talking an animal here, are we?" Ethan shook his head. He didn't answer, because a thought had already crossed his mind. The town had been quiet for months, the kind of quiet that usually meant something was festering underneath. They followed the trail downstream, Brutus tugging at his leash like a storm-driven animal. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth, rotting leaves, and iron. Something in Ethan's chest tightened, a premonition he couldn't shake. Half an hour later, the trail ended abruptly. The river widened here, the current swallowing most of the evidence. Ethan stepped carefully, scanning the water with his flashlight. Something moved beneath the surface. "Hold up," he muttered. Brutus barked again, and then silence. The dog's ears flattened. Ethan's pulse spiked. There, drifting in the shallow eddy, was a hand. Pale, limp, fingernails broken and streaked with mud. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing his stomach to stay put. "Jesus," Marla whispered. She crouched beside him, eyes scanning the banks. "We need backup. Now!" The walkie crackled almost immediately, but instead of the usual static, a voice cut through. Ethan's own voice, from the recorder on the call box at the station. Only he hadn't pressed the button. A chill ran down his spine. "Ethan, what the hell?" Marla gripped his arm. "Focus. Don't let it get in your head." Ethan nodded, forcing himself to breathe, but his mind wouldn't stop replaying the image. The pale hand, the rippling water, the eerie silence surrounding it. By the time backup arrived, the river had swallowed most of the evidence. Divers suited up, lights cutting through the black water. Ethan and Marla stood back, watching as the search grid expanded. Brutus refused to leave the edge, nose pressed to the current, growling low and incessantly. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The first body surfaced at dawn, twisted in the river's current, hair plastered to the skull, face pale and broken. Ethan felt bile rise in his throat, his stomach turning. Yet he couldn't tear his gaze away. The victim was young, early 20s, and Ethan recognized the hoodie, the worn sneakers, the same as the missing reports piling up in his office. Marla's voice was low when she spoke. "It's worse than we thought. This isn't random. This is deliberate." The river seemed to carry its secrets downstream, as if mocking the town. Families gathered at the edges, news crews flashing lights into the dark corners of their quiet homes. Ethan felt their eyes on him, not accusatory, but searching, hungry for someone to take responsibility for the unthinkable. Back at the station, the investigation began in earnest. Ethan pored over missing persons reports, cross-referencing names with last known locations, looking for patterns. Marla hovered nearby, meticulous, silent, a professional mask hiding the turmoil underneath. "You okay?" she asked finally, leaning against his desk. Her voice had a softness that betrayed the hard exterior she always wore on the streets. Ethan hesitated. "I will be, but it's like the river itself is trying to tell us something." Marla's eyes flicked to him. "The river doesn't tell, Ethan. People do. And right now, I don't trust anyone." A thought gnawed at Ethan. One of the missing had been his childhood friend, Tommy Weller. They had grown up together, fishing along this very river, joking about monsters beneath the surface. Tommy had been missing for weeks. Ethan hadn't told anyone, not even Marla. That guilt sat heavy in his chest. The files on the desk blurred in his vision as exhaustion took its toll. Brutus lay at his feet, restless, ears twitching. Ethan scratched behind the dog's ears, murmuring under his breath, "We'll find them, buddy, all of them." But deep in the back of his mind, a darker thought whispered, what if the river had already taken more than they could ever find? Later that night, Ethan returned to the riverbank alone, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't explain. The mist rolled off the water like a living thing, curling around his boots. He knelt, scanning the surface, when he saw something move beneath the shadows, something small, fragile, and unmistakably human. His breath caught. A second later, the movement vanished, leaving only ripples and the feeling that someone or something was watching him. Ethan straightened, heart thudding, and whispered to the night, "If you want me to stop, you'll have to show yourself." And for a moment, the river whispered back, "If this chapter gripped you, consider giving a like and subscribing. There's more lurking in the shadows, and it only gets darker." The morning fog clung to Millersbrook like a living shroud, and the river had calmed only superficially. Ethan returned to the station, exhaustion lining his face, eyes rimmed red from hours without sleep. Marla was already there, coffee in hand, staring at the wall of missing persons photos pinned above her desk. Night patrol reports came in, she said without looking up. 3 more people were last seen near the river. 2 teens, 1 adult male. All disappeared within the last month. Ethan's gut twisted, and none of the parents reported anything unusual. Marla shook her head. Not until they realized the missing kept piling up. No one wants to admit Millersbrook has a problem. Pride, fear, probably a mix of both. Brutus lay at Ethan's feet, his ears twitching at every creak of the old station floors. The dog had a knack for sensing things humans couldn't. Danger, lies, death lurking in the quiet. Ethan rubbed the dog's head absently, feeling a shiver run down his spine. "Something about this doesn't add up," Ethan murmured. "Bodies showing up only after a week or more, all along the river. Whoever's doing this knows the terrain, knows how to make the river hide their work." Marla finally looked at him, her dark eyes sharp. "We're not dealing with amateurs, Ethan. This is methodical, clean. The river isn't just a dumping ground. It's part of the plan." The words hung in the air, a weight neither of them wanted to acknowledge. By noon, the town was buzzing with rumors. Social media lit up with speculation, dark theories, half-truths, and panic-stirring posts from people who had never seen the bodies but felt the threat anyway. Ethan felt the tension gnawing at him, but he also felt an inner resolve harden. Millersbrook might be small, but deserved answers, and he would find them, even if the truth was uglier than anyone could imagine. Back at the river, Ethan and Marla retraced the trail from the previous night. Brutus led the way, nose low, tail stiff. The mud gave way beneath their boots, slippery with rain from earlier in the week. Every step felt like walking into a trap, every shadow a potential threat. "Look," Ethan said, pointing to a patch of mud near a fallen oak. Deep grooves in the earth indicated something heavy had been dragged across the bank. "This isn't just blood trails. Someone staged it." Marla crouched to examine the marks. Staged or missed something? Before Ethan could respond, Brutus barked sharply and froze, ears pricked. He lunged forward, snarling at the underbrush. Ethan and Marla followed cautiously. Between the roots of an ancient willow, partially hidden by overgrown weeds, lay a small, rusted box. "Found something," Ethan said, voice low. Marla pulled gloves from her pocket and opened it carefully. Inside were a series of photographs, snapshots of the missing. Some were candid, taken from the shadows. Others were staged, showing the victims in compromising positions, terrified. Ethan's stomach churned. "They've been watching them," Marla said, voice barely above a whisper. "Every move, every day." Ethan's hand shook slightly. "Someone in town knows this is happening. Someone local." Marla's jaw tightened. "And we're going to find out who. But we need to be careful. Whoever did this is meticulous. They'll be watching us, too." Hours passed, and as evening settled over Millersbrook, Ethan returned home. The town looked quiet, deceptively so, but Ethan knew better. The streets, the alleys, even the riverbanks held secrets. And every secret he uncovered seemed to make him a target. At home, he found a note slipped under his door. "Stop looking or they come for you next." He felt the weight of it immediately, the icy fear that settled deep in his bones. He read it twice, careful to memorize the handwriting, the uneven spacing. Whoever it was, they weren't bluffing. Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a message from Tommy Weller, his childhood friend, who had been missing for weeks. But the number wasn't Tommy's. It was masked, anonymous. The message was simple. "Meet me at the old mill, midnight, alone." A knot twisted in Ethan's stomach. The mill had been abandoned for years, an old textile factory at the edge of town. Its windows were shattered, walls crumbling, but was far enough from the river to keep them unnoticed. He looked at Brutus, who tilted his head. Sensing the tension, Ethan knew he couldn't ignore it. The town's missing, the bodies, the photographs, it all pointed to something bigger, something orchestrated with surgical precision. Midnight arrived, and Ethan approached the mill cautiously. The moon hung low, casting fractured beams through broken windows. Brutus moved silently at his side. Inside, the air smelled of rust, mold, and decay. Ethan's footsteps echoed to the cavernous space, every sound amplified in the hollow building. A figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, hunched slightly, face obscured by a hood. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Tommy?" he asked, voice shaky. The figure stepped forward, pulling down the hood. It wasn't Tommy. It was someone older, familiar, someone he'd trusted once. Deputy Carl Hanley, a man who had worked in the sheriff's office for over a decade, known for his steady hand and unwavering loyalty. "Carl." Ethan breathed, disbelief written across his face. Carl's lips curved into a thin, cold smile. "Hello, Ethan. I was wondering how long it would take you to catch on." Ethan's mind raced. What were you talking about?" Carl took a step closer. "This town, it's always been dirty under the surface. People think it's peaceful, but it's rotten. The river, it's just cleaning up the mistakes that everyone else ignores." Marla's earlier words rang in Ethan's head. Methodical, meticulous. And now the puzzle pieces clicked into a horrifying picture. "You've been killing them?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Carl shook his head. "Not killing, correcting. The missing, the unworthy, the ones the town would rather forget. And the photos? Just a reminder of who's in charge." Ethan's stomach turned. He looked at Brutus, then back at Carl. The deputy's calm, measured demeanor made it worse. It was deliberate, cold, human in the worst way. "You're sick," Ethan said, voice rising, shaking with anger. Carl laughed softly. "Sick? Perhaps. But someone has to take responsibility for Millersbrook." Ethan backed away, mind spinning, trying to think, trying to process the betrayal. Someone he trusted, someone sworn to uphold the law, had become the monster behind the river. Carl reached into his coat, but before he could strike, Brutus lunged, teeth bared, knocking him back. A struggle ensued, shadows flitting across the crumbling walls, the sound of snapping wood and growls filling the mill. Ethan drew his service weapon, keeping Carl at bay. "You'll never get away with this," Ethan shouted, voice echoing off the walls. Carl smirked, bleeding slightly from a scratch Brutus had given him. "Get away? No, Ethan. I've already won. Millersbrook will remember this night forever." But then a sudden noise, metal scraping, a heavy crash, distracted Carl. Brutus seized a moment, dragging him toward the open mill door. Carl's shouts echoed in the night as Ethan bolted after them. Outside, the river shimmered in the moonlight. Brutus had cornered Carl near the riverbank, water rushing at his boots. Ethan approached slowly, gun raised but ready to call for backup. Carl looked at him, eyes hard, unrepentant. "Do you understand now? Everything has a cost." Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes, and you're paying for yours." Backup arrived moments later, sirens cutting through the night. Carl was taken into custody, but the silence of the river remained, watching, waiting, as if judging what had transpired. Ethan knelt by the edge, watching the water swirl around Brutus's paws. "We found him," he murmured, almost to himself. "But at what cost?" And for the first time, Ethan understood the river wasn't just hiding the town's secrets. It was reflecting them back, dark, unforgiving, and impossible to ignore. If you're on the edge of your seat, give this chapter a like and subscribe. There's one last chapter, and it's where the river reveals everything. The river had never seemed more alive. Dawn broke over Millersbrook, casting pale light across the water's surface, yet the current still carried the weight of the night's horrors. Officer Ethan Cole stood at the riverbank, Brutus at his side, watching as Carl Hanley was led into the waiting squad cars. The deputy's face remained unrepentant, a chilling reminder how darkness could hide behind the badge of authority. Ethan's hands shook, gripping the railing along the dock. He tried to steady his mind, but questions kept clawing at him. How many more had Carl watched? How many had he judged? And the photographs, the stage scenes along the riverbank. How long had it been going on? Marla joined him silently, her presence grounding him. She didn't need to speak. Ethan already knew what she was thinking. The river wasn't done with them yet. "You think that's all?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice almost lost in the gentle rush of water. Marla's eyes were grim. "No. Rivers like this, they hide things. They have memory. And Carl, he might have been the mind behind it, but he's not the only one with secrets." Ethan turned, heart tightening. "What do you mean?" Marla nodded toward the water. "The river gives up its secrets slowly. We've only scratched the surface. Bodies, yes, but there are things we can't see, things that the town would rather keep buried." Ethan swallowed hard. He glanced at Brutus, who sat obediently, eyes fixed on the dark water. The dog's instincts had saved him more than once, but even Brutus seemed aware of the river's unspoken warnings. That afternoon, Ethan returned to the river alone. He had to see for himself, to feel the weight of it without the distraction of police radios or town gossip. The air smelled damp, metallic, and heavy with decay. Mud squelched beneath his boots as he approached the same bend where the first blood trail had led. He noticed a flicker, something beneath the surface, moving unnaturally, leaning closer, heart hammering. He saw it, a small, rusted box, half submerged, wedged between rocks. Ethan's fingers trembled as he retrieved it, water dripping from the corroded metal. Inside were more photographs, journals, and a stack of letters tied with a fraying ribbon. He opened one letter, hands shaking. The handwriting was delicate, almost desperate. "They think the town will forget, but it won't. The river remembers everything. They'll all know soon. L." Ethan frowned. "L who?" He rifled through the journals, scanning notes, sketches, and observations of the town, the river, and the missing. A pattern emerged. Carl had been documenting, but he hadn't been acting alone. Someone else had orchestrated much of the chaos, a shadow manipulating from behind the scenes. Using Carl as an instrument, a sudden splash made him whirl around. Brutus leapt from the bank, growling, teeth bared, but there was no one there. The river rippled unnaturally, carrying debris and leaves downstream, almost like it was breathing. Ethan's pulse surged. He felt the unease settle deep in his chest. The river was still watching. Later that evening, Ethan confronted Marla at the station. He laid out his findings, including the letters and journals. "Someone else?" Marla asked, brow furrowed. Ethan nodded. "Yes, Carr was just a piece. Whoever it is, they've been orchestrating everything, pulling strings from the shadows. And judging by these letters, they want the town to witness the river's reckoning." Marla's eyes darkened. "We're dealing with a mastermind, someone patient, meticulous, and unafraid of blood." Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhausted, mind reeling. "And I've got a feeling they're closer than we think. Someone we trust." Marla didn't respond immediately, only letting her gaze linger on him. For a moment, silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken truths and tension. The night brought wind, rain, and whispers along the river. Ethan returned once more, this time a plan. He would bait the mastermind, using the letters as a decoy. He placed them back in the same spot where he'd found them. Brutus sniffed the air, ears alert. Hours passed. Then, from the shadows, movement. A figure emerged, slender, wearing a hood, cautious yet deliberate. Ethan tensed, hand on his weapon, ready for confrontation. The figure stopped at the river's edge and crouched to inspect the box. Ethan stepped forward. "I don't think you want to do that," he said quietly. The figure froze, then slowly turned. The hood fell back. Ethan's heart dropped. It was someone he'd known all his life, his mentor, former chief investigator Linda Carver, a woman he had trusted implicitly, who had guided his career and taught him to see what others couldn't. "Linda," he whispered. She smiled, a cold, distant expression that made his stomach churn. "Hello, Ethan. I wondered how long it would take you to find me." "How? Why?" Ethan's voice cracked. "You trained me. You were supposed to protect people, not—" Linda's eyes glinted, reflecting the moonlight on the water. "The town is weak. People forget. They take and take without consequence. Carl was a pawn. I've been cleaning up, guiding the river's work. You should understand, Ethan, you've seen what happens when the town ignores the suffering beneath its surface." Ethan shook his head, disbelief and fury warring in his chest. This is madness. You've killed people, manipulated families, used the river as a weapon." Linda's lips curled into a soft laugh. "Madness is perspective, Ethan, and I'm not done. The river will show the town the cost of negligence." Brutus growled low, stepping between Ethan and Linda. Ethan raised his weapon, fingers tight on the trigger. Every instinct screamed at him. The woman he admired, the mentor he trusted, was the architect of horrors he couldn't have imagined. "You leave me no choice," Ethan said, voice low, steady despite the storm inside. Linda's smile never faltered. She stepped closer to the river, gaze fixed on the water, then let the river decide. Suddenly, she slipped. Ethan lunged, catching her arm just before she fell into the current. The river surged, almost alive, splashing violently against the rocks. Brutus barked, teeth snapping at the edges, as if sensing the danger was greater than any human struggle. "You can't hold it forever," Linda hissed, wrenching against him. "It belongs to the river now." Ethan tightened his grip. "No, not this time." Backup arrived moments later, lights cutting to the dark, rain-slicked landscape. Linda was taken into custody, still defiant, still smiling, as though she had already won some invisible game. Ethan watched silently. The river calmed once more, yet he knew it had claimed a piece of his innocence, leaving a permanent scar. Days later, Millersbrook tried to return to normal. Bodies were recovered, families reunited, the mastermind arrested, but the river still whispered. Children avoided its banks, and the locals' polite smiles carried an undercurrent of fear. Ethan walked along the same trail with Brutus, boots sinking into the mud, memories of the past weeks heavy on him. Marla joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" she asked softly. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I will be." But something changed in the river, in us. It won't be the same again. Brutus nudged Ethan's hand, a reminder that some innocence remained, some protection against the darkness. Ethan knelt, scratching behind the dog's ears. "We did what we could, buddy, but the river, it's patient. It remembers everything." They stood together, watching the sunrise glint across the water, silver and fragile. And though the river flowed steadily on, Ethan knew it carried scars, secrets, and whispers that would haunt the town forever. Millersbrook had survived the storm of human darkness, but its heart had been reshaped by it. Forever aware, forever wary, forever haunted by the current that had carried its sins into the light. Ethan's eyes lingered on the water. Somewhere beneath the surface, the river waited, silent but unyielding, keeping its memories as fiercely as it had always done. And in that quiet, Ethan felt a mixture of relief, grief, and a haunting respect for the river that had exposed the truth and would never forget it. If this journey through darkness and revelation gripped you, hit like and subscribe. The river has its stories, and you've just witnessed one of its darkest currents.